The allegations Meghan has made are simply not true. Her account does not reflect what actually happened, and it has led the public to a deeply misleading impression. That version of events has no basis in.
The room had barely settled when William made the decision no one expected him to make in front of his own family. Across the table, Princess Anne remained completely still, already knowing where her vote would fall. Then Harry's name was called. The motion was placed before the Royal Foundation Council, and two of the monarchy's most formidable figures voted together to remove him from his seat. In seconds, a family dispute became something far more permanent. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William entered the meeting composed, but the strain was impossible to hide. Anne had already read the agenda twice, and neither spoke while the papers were distributed. The Royal Foundation Council, in this dramatized account, is the decision-making body overseeing the charity's direction and authority. That mattered because a seat on the council was not ceremonial. It carried influence, it carried trust, and for Harry, it carried a link to the work he had once shared with his brother. Anne had warned William before the meeting that loyalty could not become an excuse for avoiding responsibility. The Princess Royal understood what the vote would do to Harry emotionally, yet she refused to soften her position. William understood something even more painful. He was not deciding the fate of an ordinary member. He was deciding whether his younger brother could still hold institutional power beside him after years of tension had worn away confidence. Then the sealed addition to the agenda changed everything. The vote had not been expected that day. Harry believed another discussion was coming, another chance to argue his case, another delay before finality. Instead, the motion was called immediately. William lowered his eyes. For one long second, he said nothing. Then came the words, "In favor." He placed his pen beside the voting paper and stopped moving. Anne waited barely a heartbeat. In favor. No hesitation. No attempt to soften the impact. Her vote aligned with William's. And in that instant, Harry's active seat on the council was gone. When the decision reached him, the speed of it cut deeper than the result itself. He had expected resistance. He had not expected finality. But the vote was only the visible explosion. Something had happened before that meeting. Something serious enough to convince William that delay was no longer possible, and firm enough to bring Anne to the same conclusion. To understand why he crossed that line with her beside him, the story now has to move away from the council table and toward the three people carrying unresolved history into that room. For William, Harry was never simply another council member whose position could be reviewed. He was the brother who had walked beside him through grief, ceremony, adulthood, marriage, and eventually separation. For Anne, however, the question had become colder. Could someone remain attached to an institution while repeatedly challenging the people responsible for protecting it? Between William's private sorrow and Anne's hard discipline, Harry was facing two very different forms of rejection at once. William had always treated the Royal Foundation as more than a royal name attached to charitable work. For him, it represented responsibility, shared purpose, and the belief that public service could survive private disagreements. The foundation itself was the charitable organization through which senior members supported long-term causes and projects. That made Harry's council seat important because it carried real influence, not just sentimental value. The prince understood that removing his brother meant admitting their old partnership could no longer function as it once had. Anne approached the same problem from the opposite direction. The Princess Royal had spent years building a reputation around duty, consistency, and showing up when required. To her, family connection could never become a permanent shield against accountability. Months earlier, during a private conversation documented in an internal family account, she had warned Harry that royal blood did not guarantee institutional authority forever. He had listened then, but he had not believed she would ever support removing him. Harry felt that disbelief collapse when the message arrived. He read the confirmation once, then again, stopping when he saw Anne's name beside William's. His anger toward his brother was expected. Her involvement was different. It told him this was no longer simply another clash between two siblings. The disagreement had widened, and someone he once believed might remain neutral had chosen a side. He kept the phone in his hand for several seconds before placing it face down without answering. Catherine had sensed this break coming before either brother admitted it aloud. The Princess of Wales had watched William carry the tension into private conversations, growing quieter whenever Harry's position was discussed. She never told him how to vote. Instead, she made one thing clear. Whatever he decided, he would have to live with it as both a future king and a brother. William understood exactly why that mattered. A political victory inside the foundation could still become a personal loss at home. Harry's silence after the vote therefore carried more weight than anger. William knew his brother had once been capable of fierce arguments followed by reconciliation, and Anne knew family disputes could survive only if trust remained underneath them. This time, something had changed. The vote had not grown from years of tension alone. One recent confrontation had turned frustration into a crisis, and when the family later searched for the moment everything became inevitable, that confrontation stood above every argument that had come before it. The final fracture did not begin with a public speech, a newspaper headline, or another royal interview. It began behind a closed door, during what was supposed to be a routine foundation strategy session. William arrived expecting discussion. Harry arrived determined to challenge a decision he believed had already been made without him. Anne was not initially present, but by the time the conversation ended, William walked out convinced that the disagreement had crossed from family tension into an institutional crisis. William had spent months resisting pressure for a formal review. The prince knew Harry's day-to-day involvement had fallen sharply, yet his younger brother's historic connection to the charitable work still carried enormous emotional weight. A governance review, meaning a formal examination of who holds authority and whether they are fulfilling their responsibilities, could easily be interpreted as punishment. He feared that once the process began, every disagreement would be seen through the lens of family betrayal rather than institutional responsibility. Harry entered that private strategy meeting with a different fear. He believed decisions were moving ahead without him, and he was determined not to let his reduced role become an excuse for removing his influence entirely. The Duke challenged William directly over a major restructuring of the foundation and demanded to know why his approval had not been sought. He then insisted that his council privileges remain untouched, arguing that his connection to the organization had been built over years and could not simply be reduced because his circumstances had changed. William felt the argument turn personal almost immediately. He told Harry that caring about their shared causes was no longer the central issue. The real question was whether he was prepared to accept the responsibilities that came with decision-making power. Harry did not back down. He accused his brother of rewriting the rules now that he controlled the room. The words landed hard. William had expected resistance, but not an accusation that his authority itself had become the problem. Harry left without resolving anything, and the silence afterward was heavier than the argument. William remained alone, looking at the empty chair his brother had occupied moments earlier. He gathered the scattered papers himself rather than calling an aide. Then another blow arrived. Several senior council members had already raised concerns and were preparing to request a formal review of Harry's position. The family dispute was no longer contained between two brothers. Anne received a private briefing later that evening through a documented internal account. The Princess Royal listened without interruption before asking one question: does he intend to serve, or does he intend to retain influence? William knew exactly what she meant. If Harry wanted authority without responsibility, the argument had reached the point of no return. That empty chair now carried a meaning neither brother could ignore, and when they finally met again, there would be no cameras, no smiling relatives, and no ceremonial distractions. Only two brothers forced to say aloud what years of distance had left unresolved. William did not send an aide to deliver the warning. He faced Harry himself. The conversation began quietly, almost painfully politely, but neither brother had entered the room expecting reconciliation. Harry wanted to know whether the council review was real. William refused to evade the answer. And when Harry accused him of allowing palace politics to erase their shared legacy, William finally said the sentence that changed the temperature of the room. He could no longer protect Harry's position. William had arranged the meeting before the vote because he refused to let his brother learn the truth through council correspondence. The prince knew a formal review, meaning an official examination of whether a member should continue holding authority, could quickly become something far more personal. Harry understood that too. He entered believing William still had enough influence to stop the process if he chose. That belief turned the conversation into more than a discussion about governance. It became a test of whether brotherhood still carried weight when institutional power was on the line. Harry pushed back hardest when the subject turned to legacy. The Duke argued that removing his seat would erase part of the charitable identity the brothers had built together after losing Diana. William reacted immediately. He told him their mother could not become the answer to every disagreement they faced as adults. The words wounded them both. Harry heard rejection. William heard himself saying something he had never wanted to say, yet he refused to withdraw it. Then the real pressure surfaced. William told Harry that Anne was prepared to support removal unless he gave the council a clear commitment to resume meaningful responsibilities. The Princess Royal had made her position known privately and had no interest in protecting a seat that no longer matched active service. Harry saw the condition differently. To him, it sounded like an ultimatum designed to force him back under rules he believed William now controlled. Harry refused. He would not bargain for a position he believed he had already earned through years of work. William understood in that instant that the vote was becoming unavoidable. Neither man shouted. That made the moment worse. Harry pushed his chair backward and stood while his brother remained seated. William looked at him and said, "I cannot protect your seat anymore." Harry paused, then answered, "Then don't pretend this is only business." The door closed on whatever possibility remained between them. Harry left believing his brother had made the decisive choice. But William knew another force was now shaping what came next. Anne had already begun examining exactly what authority the council possessed, and whether sentiment could legally or institutionally delay the decision. Because behind the family confrontation lay a colder question. Who truly had the authority to decide whether Harry stayed, and who was prepared to use it? Princess Anne had watched royal disputes consume enormous emotional energy before, and she had little interest in turning another one into theater. For her, Harry's seat came down to a principle that sounded almost brutally simple. Responsibility must accompany influence. While William wrestled with the consequences as a brother, Anne began studying the council structure as a working royal. The answer she reached would remove the last excuse for postponing the decision. Anne treated the council rules with the same seriousness she brought to every royal duty. In this dramatized account, membership depended on active participation, collective responsibility, and the continuing confidence of fellow members, rather than bloodline alone. That distinction mattered because Harry's position could not simply be protected forever by family history. It also mattered for William, because keeping his brother in place despite reduced involvement risked making every future decision look personal, inconsistent, or unfair. William understood why Anne's support was becoming crucial. The prince knew critics could easily portray any removal as one brother pushing another aside. Her involvement changed that calculation. The Princess Royal had no personal interest in humiliating Harry, and that gave her position weight. Still, she understood the emotional cost. She knew her vote would hurt him. Yet she believed allowing the dispute to drag on would leave William trapped between family loyalty and institutional responsibility, with no end in sight. William finally asked the question he had been avoiding. In a private conversation, he looked toward Anne and asked whether she thought he was being too severe. She did not answer immediately. Then came the line that stayed with him. Severity was not the same thing as finality when responsibility had been repeatedly refused. The words gave him no comfort, but they removed one more excuse for delay. Anne then found the provision that changed everything. Buried inside the fictional council rules was a dormant clause allowing membership to be reconsidered when someone could no longer maintain the expected level of participation. The clause did not automatically remove Harry. Instead, it forced an explicit vote. That meant William could not hide behind procedure. He would have to speak, choose, and accept responsibility for the outcome himself. Anne slid the relevant page across a small desk toward William. She tapped one paragraph with her finger, withdrew her hand, and waited. He read it once, then again. The prince now knew exactly what the rules allowed, and the knowledge felt heavier than uncertainty. The mechanics of power had been settled. What remained was the human cost. William still did not know how quickly Harry's removal would reshape relationships throughout the family, once the decision became official. But the first consequences were already moving toward them, before Harry had even decided how he wanted to answer his brother. The first consequence was not a palace announcement. It was something smaller and more painful. A revised council document circulated without Harry's name among the active members, reducing an enormous family rupture to a clean line of administrative text. William read it in silence. Anne accepted it without comment. Harry, when the updated document reached him, stared at the omission longer than he expected. Whatever arguments remained between them, the reality was suddenly impossible to dismiss. Harry had known what the vote meant in theory, but the revised paperwork made it real. His name disappeared from active committee participation, future decision-making lists, and internal council circulation. Those changes mattered, because his seat had been one of the remaining formal links to the charitable identity he once shared with William. Losing it did not simply remove authority. It separated him from a chapter of royal life that had helped define him for years. William refused to let the transition become a victory parade. The prince instructed the foundation team not to celebrate, leak triumphantly, or describe Harry's removal as punishment. He wanted the change handled quietly, because humiliating his brother would only deepen a wound that was already severe. Anne agreed. The Princess Royal insisted that accountability did not require erasing everything Harry had contributed before the relationship broke down. Harry learned that distinction through a formal written notice. The Duke was told that losing council authority did not remove his name from past charitable initiatives, or rewrite the work he had already completed. The message surprised him. He had expected a clean break, perhaps even a deliberate effort to distance the foundation from his history. Instead, Anne had pushed for the opposite. She wanted his present authority ended, not his past contribution destroyed. William felt no relief when the decision settled into reality. Catherine found him standing over the revised council papers, reading lines that no longer contained Harry's name. The Princess of Wales understood immediately that the vote had given him control without giving him peace. He had protected the structure he believed mattered, but he had also formally removed his younger brother from something they once built together. Then came the moment that exposed what William was still carrying. He entered the next meeting room before everyone else, and looked toward the chair Harry traditionally occupied. An aide moved to rearrange the table, but the prince stopped him. "Remove the place card," he said quietly. "Leave the chair." The chair remained. Harry's authority was gone, but William could not bring himself to erase every trace of his presence. That small decision made one truth impossible to ignore. Beneath the procedures, votes, and rules, he was still reacting as a brother. The institutional battle had ended, but the personal one had not. And without advisors or council members between them, William and Harry would now have to confront what the vote actually meant. There was no council table between them this time. No papers, no advisors, no one waiting outside to count votes or interpret body language. William and Harry met privately after the removal had become irreversible, and for perhaps the first time during the crisis, neither man had anything left to win. Harry could not recover his seat in that room. William could not undo the choice without destroying the authority of the decision. All that remained was the relationship underneath it. William had requested the meeting only after the formal process was complete. The prince wanted one clear boundary between institutional judgment and family conversation, because blending the two had already caused enough damage. Harry agreed for the same reason. The vote was over. A council decision, meaning the formal choice made by the governing members, could no longer be changed through private emotion. For once, neither brother could accuse the other of bargaining. Harry spoke first. The Duke admitted that losing the seat had hurt, but hearing William personally vote for removal had hurt more. If the council had acted around his brother, he could have blamed procedure. Instead, he had heard that the decisive choice came from someone who had shared the same grief, the same childhood memories, and the same early charitable mission. William did not interrupt. He knew there was no answer that could make that pain disappear. William finally told Harry that saying "in favor" had been difficult precisely because they were brothers. He insisted that refusing to vote would have created another problem. Harry would have been treated by different rules simply because of their blood relationship. The prince understood how cold that sounded. He also believed avoiding the decision would have turned family loyalty into permanent institutional protection. Then another assumption fell apart. William told Harry he had never asked Anne to support him. The Princess Royal had studied the situation independently and reached her own conclusion. Harry had believed the two votes were part of a coordinated family campaign against him. Learning otherwise forced him to reconsider the story he had built around his removal. Harry went quiet before making his own admission. He had expected his historical connection to the Foundation to preserve his place, even without the level of participation William demanded. Saying it aloud changed something. For the first time, he acknowledged that he had wanted distance from royal responsibility without fully surrendering royal influence. Silence followed. Then William extended his hand across the table. Harry stared at it for several seconds before taking it briefly. Nothing was restored. No vote was reversed. But the gesture separated rejection from hatred. By the time the brothers left that room, their positions were settled. Yet beyond the palace walls, the private decision was already becoming something far larger and far harsher than either man had intended. The private vote did not stay private for long. By morning, what William and Anne had treated as a matter of responsibility was being presented as a historic rejection of Harry himself. Broadcasters dissected the family symbolism. Commentators argued over whether William had protected the Foundation or deepened the royal divide. And outside the gates where tourists normally photographed guards and carriages, conversations shifted toward one startling image: two senior royals voting together against the king's younger son. William saw the headlines before the first official response had settled. The prince had expected criticism, but the phrase, "cast out," angered him, because it erased the distinction he had tried so hard to preserve. Harry had lost a council seat, not his place in the family. A council seat, in this dramatized account, meant a formal role in governing the Foundation's decisions and responsibilities. That difference mattered because William believed authority could end without affection disappearing with it. Harry faced a different kind of discomfort. The Duke saw sympathetic commentary describing the vote as a deliberate humiliation, yet he knew the story was more complicated. William had warned him before the decision. He had been given the chance to understand what was coming, even if he rejected the terms surrounding it. That knowledge made the public sympathy harder to accept completely, because outrage outside the family was simplifying something that had already wounded both brothers privately. Then Anne's role became impossible to ignore. The Princess Royal had initially been treated as a supporting figure in the dispute, but once her vote became public, the story changed. Her involvement suggested that the decision was larger than sibling resentment. A fictional morning paper carried the enormous headline, "Brothers Divided," with separate photographs of William and Harry dominating the front page. Nearby, a television correspondent described Anne's vote as a decision of institution, not simply sibling rivalry. William responded through a short Foundation statement rather than a personal attack. The statement emphasized active responsibility, governance, and the expectations attached to council membership. He refused to criticize Harry by name. That restraint mattered. The prince understood that defending the decision did not require humiliating his brother, even as commentators demanded a sharper explanation. Harry noticed that restraint too. The Duke remained angry, but the absence of a public attack confirmed what William had told him privately. The vote had been intended to end an institutional conflict, not launch a family war. Anne's firmness had made the decision harsher, yet her presence had also prevented the story from becoming a simple tale of one brother defeating another. The noise outside the family would eventually fade. Headlines would change. Commentators would move on. But one question would remain after everything else disappeared. Had William acted from revenge, from duty, or from the painful acceptance that Harry's royal role had fundamentally changed? In the end, there was no triumphant winner. William kept control of the institution he believed he was responsible for protecting. Anne upheld the standard she believed applied to every member equally. Harry lost a seat that connected him to an important chapter of his former royal life. Yet the deepest consequence was not written into any council record. The vote forced all three of them to finally accept something years of arguments had avoided. Affection could survive even when official roles could not. William understood that the decision had changed more than a council list. The prince had formally removed Harry's active seat from the dramatized Royal Foundation Council, the governing body responsible for directing the organization's work and authority. Anne had supported that outcome, and together their votes created a new expectation. Influence could no longer survive without responsibility. That mattered beyond one family argument, because it established that royal history alone could not guarantee permanent institutional power. Harry eventually accepted the consequence he had resisted for so long. The Duke had wanted distance from the daily demands of royal structures, while hoping his charitable legacy could remain untouched by that choice. Losing the seat forced him to confront the difference between legacy and authority. William did not erase what his brother had contributed in earlier years. He made sure that work remained acknowledged, even as present decision-making power came to an end. Anne's role proved just as important. The Princess Royal had prevented the moment from becoming a simple story of William defeating Harry. Her vote made the decision about duty, consistency, and the responsibilities attached to influence. She had never argued that Harry's past should disappear. She had argued that the present had to reflect reality. That distinction gave the outcome its final meaning. William carried that meaning into the next council meeting. He entered, noticed Harry's old chair still standing at the table, and stopped for only a moment. The place card was gone. The chair remained. He did not ask for it to be removed. He simply took his own seat and began the meeting. That chair became the final symbol. Harry's history with William and the Foundation remained real, but his governing role had ended. The prince had chosen responsibility over sentiment. Anne had reinforced the principle. Harry had finally been forced to accept that distance from royal duty also meant distance from royal authority. The vote did not erase the brothers' bond, and it did not magically repair what had been broken. It did something more final. It separated family from office. Harry could remain William's brother without automatically remaining his institutional partner. And that was the true weight of the vote. Not that William defeated Harry, but that the royal family finally stopped pretending love, history, and authority were the same thing. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.